Hello and welcome to Filling the Sink, a podcast from Catalan News. My name's Lorcan Doherty and today we're talking about 10 women who changed Catalonia. The 8th of March is International Women's Day. We've marked it on previous podcasts talking about gender violence and gender equality. It's important to talk about those issues, of course, but it's only one part of what International Women's Day is about. It's also about celebrating success, something maybe we haven't done on those previous podcasts, but we're going to put right today. I'm joined by Lea Beliaeva. Hello, Lea.
Hi, Lorcan.
So we've got 10 women that we've picked to talk about. We've narrowed it down. We've got a lot to get through. So let's get on it. Who is the first woman on our list?
The first one on our list is Caterina Albert, also known as Victor Català. And she was a writer who published her book Solitud in 1905.
So Solitude?
Solitude, exactly. And it has also been published in English and in many other languages. So one funny thing about her is that the pseudonym that she chose, Victor Català.
A man's name.
A man's name. Well, the problem was that she got a lot of criticism when she wrote as a woman. She wrote a play called La Infanticida, which was about a woman killing her newborn child. So at the time, well, still today, that would be a huge issue to talk about. But at the time, in the 1900s, well, that was even a larger issue. So, and after that, well, then she just changed her name, or she took on the pseudonym, and she had huge success.
So here we go, celebrating women. And the first one that we mentioned took a man's name in order to kind of get important people to pay attention to her, basically, and to face less criticism.
Exactly.
And the particular name she chose is also kind of interesting, Victor Català.
Yes, because, it might sound like a normal name, but actually what she was trying to refer to is Victoria Catalana.
So that's reflecting her politics as well, Catalan victory.
Exactly.
And she wrote in Catalan as well.
She wrote in Catalan and she wrote about the inner thoughts of a woman. So that was also something that wasn't very normal at the time.
So that's Caterina Albert, born in La Scala up on the Costa Brava. On to the next person on our list then, Lea, Francesca Bonnemaison.
Francesca Bonnemaison, she was a little bit more open with her activism than Victor Català, because her life project was, in fact, to empower women. I'm not trying to discredit what Caterina Albert did, but Francesca Bonnemaison just did it in a different way.
So she was more or less a contemporary of Caterina Albert, born in 1872.
Yeah, and that means that she grew up in the Catalan political awakening with the Catalanist movement in the late 19th century. And in 1909, she was offered to direct a library. And her idea was to create this open library and this open space for working class women to get an education. And when it started, well, it started with 100 books, only open on Sundays, but then it became this huge success.
Yeah, looking at the figures there, within a couple of years it already had 5,000 books, and then up until just before the Civil War broke up, 20,000 books. And this was obviously quite in a unique space at the time, you know, in terms of educating women.
Yeah, and in fact, it became the first European library free for women. So the focus was, as I said before, well, for working class women to get an education, meaning learn how to read, to write, to debate politics, and later on, it became also an employment office. And before the Civil War, there were actually over 6,000 students enrolled.
And the legacy of Francesca Bonnemaison lives on today as well.
It does. Today there's a cultural center in Barcelona, and it's called Centre de Cultura de Dones Francesca Bonnemaison, or La Bonne.
La Bonne for short. I'm not surprised they shortened it down. But basically, a women's cultural centre named after her as well. So to round off this little mini section to open, our third and final historical figure is Teresa Claramunt.
Teresa Claramunt. And her story, well, she was born in Sabadell. So she grew up in a working class family. She was a factory worker.
Again, around the same time, born in 1862, so lived the turn of the century.
Exactly. And she was an anarcho-feminist, anarcho-syndicalist, and she was actually called the Catalan Rosa Luxemburg. So for those who don't know, a German Marxist. And Teresa Claramunt, she created an anarchist group and she participated in strikes, and she created the Autonomous Society of Women in Barcelona, which was the first anarcho-feminist republican institution in Spain.
And of course, people who are familiar with this period as well know that we're not talking about like niche groups or anything. This movement, the workers' movement in Barcelona and the anarcho-syndicalist movement was huge and radical, and it had a big following, and she was right at the heart of it as well.
Yeah, and she believed that in order for women to thrive, well, they had to organize and also to get an education. So that's kind of what she did.
And you've picked a quote from her.
I did, because she was also a great speaker. The quote reads, "Comrades, we women who are those most in need, the most victimized and exploited, remain divided. Must we spend our entire lives like this? No, my dear friends, we must unite to educate ourselves, and if we don't, God help us."
They don't make them like that anymore. You know, that rousing speech. And, you know, she spent time in prison as well, frequently. And unfortunately, the timing of her death was quite tragic, because she died just 3 days before the proclamation of the Second Republic in 1931.
Yeah, so she didn't get to see it. But the organization Donas Lliures, or Free Women, that was inspired by her work, they reached to have over 30,000 members.
Okay, so that's Teresa Claramunt. That is the sound of Pride Barcelona 2023. Over 110,000 people attended. Things are a bit different back in the first Pride demonstration in Barcelona, which took place in 1977. Lea, and the person we're talking about next was one of the few people there.
Exactly. It was Silvia Reyes. She's a trans activist who was born in the Canary Islands, but she came to Barcelona in 1972. And she became a key figure in the LGBT movement at the time.
I mean, this is a time Franco's dictatorship is still in play. It's kind of the tail end of it, but a lot of restrictions on freedoms.
Exactly. And, well, even for trans women, there have been restrictions up until the 90s and even today. So it's not a fight that's over yet. And Silvia Reyes, during her life, well, she was detained over 50 times for being a trans woman. She was once imprisoned in La Modelo prison. And she was also sent to a conversion center to cure, well, what was then said to cure her homosexuality, because there were laws at the time that prohibited people, well, for being homosexual and also for being trans.
When she served her sentence, she was basically kicked out of Catalonia, you might say.
She was kicked out of Catalonia and she moved to Paris and became a dancer. And she would only come back to Barcelona. Well, she came back from time to time, but to live, she came back, well, in the 2000s and has been here ever since.
And you've met her?
I met her a couple of years ago.
Tell us about that.
That was a very, very exciting moment in my life. I really felt that I was, well, in the presence of, well, just a superstar. Just because of who she is, but also because she just had this captivating presence that you just had to be next to her. And I have really some funny photos with her where I look like I'm fangirling, which I was.
Okay, maybe we'll put one of those up on our website, if you let us.
We'll see about that.
Ole! What are we listening to there?
We are listening to Carmen Amaya.
Okay, so Carmen Amaya, born 1913, died in 1963, and people have called her the greatest flamenco dancer ever. But she's not from Andalusia.
She's not from Andalusia. She's actually from the shanty towns of Somorrostro in Barcelona that we did a podcast about a while ago.
Keen Filling the Sink listeners might remember that podcast on Somorrostro. Basically, these shanty towns that were literally houses built in sand, extreme poverty, but also a real sense of community, and people lived their lives out on the streets. So music, dancing, everything happened out in the street. And that's the kind of environment she grew up in.
She grew up surrounded by music. Her father was a famous flamenco guitarist, and it is said that she learned how to dance at the same time that she learned how to walk. So she was doing that all her life. And she became famous for dancing specifically men's parts of flamenco. So that means much quicker footwork. And she insisted on wearing pants when she danced, which now sounds ridiculous. But at the time, it was something, well, really radical.
And from the shanty towns of Barcelona, she became a huge international star, appearing in Hollywood, Broadway, tours all over the world, and, met, for example, US President Harry Truman, and appeared in loads of movies as well.
She did. The last one that she did was the 1963 Los Tarantos, where she was the female lead. And just a fun fact, that movie was actually nominated for an Oscar in 1964, but Fellini's 8.5 won that year.
And that's Carmen Amaya. And we move now from flamenco to opera. I think I know that voice.
Yeah, it's Montserrat Caballé.
Wonderful stuff. Singing Puccini's O mio babbino caro. And, well, Montserrat Caballé, born in 1933, died in 2018. One of the world's most famous sopranos ever.
Exactly. And she had a 6-decade-long career. I mean, that's a very long time.
Born here in Barcelona, in Gracia. She studied at the Liceu Conservatory of Music. And she got her big international breakthrough in 1965. So she would have been in her early 20s, very young for an opera star.
Yeah, really young. And she became a huge success just that first time. Well, she got a really, really long standing ovation. Some say 10-minute long and other people say 30-minute long.
30-minute long standing ovation. Can you imagine? This was in New York. And yeah, she was a completely international star, megastar throughout the 20th century, touring all over the world, including in Denmark.
Including in Denmark. When I was very small, well, I went to see her with my mom.
How was that? Can you remember it?
Well, what I remember is the things that you also see in the videos of her, that she's very charismatic, she's very positive, smiling, making jokes. And one thing that's kind of a funny detail that I remember from when I saw her is that her garter belt broke.
During the performance? During
the performance. And she just took it, well, she laughed and made a joke and just went on singing.
On. Brilliant, brilliant. Of course, she's probably most famous outside the opera world for her collaboration with Freddie Mercury, Barcelona.
The Barcelona song for the Summer Olympics in '92.
Yeah, I'm sure we all know it. And Freddie Mercury, not a bad singer himself.
Not a bad singer.
Said that Montserrat Caballé had the best voice in the world.
Who can disagree with that?
Well, we're going to stay in the world of music, but moving in a very different direction. That is the one and only
La Rosalía.
Singing there live in Barcelona. Incredible modern day success. The most listened to female Spanish and Catalan artist on Spotify ever. What can we say about Rosalía, Lea?
Well, I mean, everybody knows her, but one thing that stands out to me is, well, her mix of styles and genres. I mean, she started doing flamenco music, but then she mixed it with R&B, with reggaeton. And, well, just when I thought with Motomami, well, I think this album isn't really for me. Well, I heard the whole album and I was just convinced.
She's well known for all her collaborations as well, with the likes of The Weeknd, Björk, Billie Eilish. And, I mean, her lyrics are, well, pretty hard to understand. I think, a mix of Spanish, English, and some Catalan in there as well. But even if you understand those languages, it's not always clear what's going on.
Exactly. It's pretty difficult to understand her singing. And there's also one thing that I'd like to mention, and that's one song that she did in Catalan, which was Millonaria. And it became a huge topic of discussion because she said cumpleaños.
Cumpleaños instead of anniversary for birthday, no?
For birthday. And cumpleaños, well...
It sounds like the Spanish cumpleaños.
Exactly. But Everyone says it, but she was criticized for not saying aniversari.
Which is the correct term in Catalan.
Which is the correct term. But
Shocking.
Exactly. But her thing is that, well, she just speaks and sings in a very authentic way. And I think that is one of the reasons why she's so popular.
So that's La Rosalía. Now, the next person we're going to talk about, we've actually featured an interview with her on Filling the Sink before.
That's true.
So this is Carme Ruscalleda.
And Carme Ruscalleda is a Catalan self-taught female chef.
Yeah, an incredible 7 Michelin stars. She's had restaurants in her hometown, in Barcelona, in Japan as well. You know, she comes from a family of farmers, very much about Catalan cuisine, healthy food, eating according to the seasons, and maybe not so much about the real avant-garde cooking that tends to get these Michelin stars, as we've talked about on the podcast before. You know, there's that real connection still to maybe what everyday cooking is about.
Yeah.
Well, here's Carme talking about that Catalan speciality, calçots.
Tot el país en tenim ganes, no només el país, i part de l'estranger. Producte de qualitat.
What's she saying there, Lea?
She's saying everywhere we want quality products. And a Catalan calçotada is the #1 superfood. An onion dipped in an olive oil and nut sauce, it doesn't get more super than that. Long live la calçotada.
Visca la calçotada. Calçots, if you don't know, are these long kind of spring onion kind of things. Mm-hmm. And the calçotada is where you get together and eat them. We've also got a podcast little episode on that as well. And it's the time of year now. We're in early March. Good time of year to go out and get some calçots.
To try this Catalan tradition.
A bit messy at times, you know. Sometimes bibs and gloves are needed. But I think even that little clip shows like Carme, she's kind of poking a bit of fun at the nutritionists, isn't she? Saying like, you talk about superfoods. We've got one here.
We have one already.
And I suppose an interesting thing, bringing it back to the International Women's Day angle, Lea, is that she's a female chef in a very male-dominated industry in terms of hot cuisines and what goes on in kitchens.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know anything about Michelin-starred restaurants and that kind of stuff, well, I wouldn't necessarily have thought that it would be a male-dominated world. But turns out it is super male-dominated. So the fact that a chef like Carme Ruscalleda has 7, well, that's quite an achievement, but also kind of ironic, no?
Ironic as well, given that the burden of cooking within the family, within the household, tends to fall on women's shoulders as well. So it's like, but as soon as as soon as we talk about restaurants and high-end restaurants, that dynamic changes. But Carme has done her bit to change that and is supposed to inspire the next generation.
She has. And for those interested, you can go to Moments in Barcelona, Mandarin Oriental Hotel, to try out her food.
Another woman who has certainly inspired the next generation, this time in athletics and sport, is Carmen Valero.
She was a middle distance runner and a double world champion in cross-country running.
Born in 1955, passed away just earlier this year. She represented Spain in the 1976 Summer Olympics in Montreal and was the only woman in the track and field squad. I mean, it's incredible to think about. This is not that long ago.
Yeah, it's just amazing to think that in 1976, she was the first female athlete to represent Spain. It's kind of mind-blowing.
She won basically every title going in Spain. Part of her legacy is kind of breaking down those barriers when even the Athletics Federation, she tells multiple tales of the discrimination she faced, how she was kind of laughed off the track at times. Mm-hmm. I read one quote where she was saying like that one of the top dogs in the federations kind of was giving a team talk to the men, and she says, well, what about us? And he goes, well, you big-breasted, big-bottomed woman, like, do you even know how to run kind of thing? Just absolutely ridiculous examples of sexism.
Yeah, and she also faced discrimination when she became a mother.
Yeah, so she faced all kinds of discrimination, and including when it came to pay. So at the time, men who won the world championship, they won a prize of 1 million pesetas, which was around 6,000 euros. Women, on the other hand, received only 600 euros. So 1/10. And it basically meant that she was never really able to go professional, even though she was the top female athlete in Spain.
Yeah, in fact, she worked at a bank from 1977 until 2018.
Well, that's 9 women that I make it. Lea, have we got time to squeeze in number 10?
I hope so.
Alexia Putellas.
Alexia Putellas. I think everyone knows who she is.
Certainly here in Barcelona, definitely.
Certainly here in Barcelona. So for those who don't know, she is the captain of the Barça football team for women, and she's also the captain of the Spanish women's national team.
Basically one of the best footballers ever, and she's still going strong. I think she's 30, so still got a few years ahead of her in her footballing career. She's won the World Cup with Spain. She's won Champions League with Barcelona. She's won individual awards as well, 2 Ballon d'Ors. And off the pitch as well there, she's been a massive influence.
She really has. And sometimes, well, people are faced with a situation where you have to act. You don't really want to, but you just have to. And she found herself in that situation when Luis Rubiales kissed Jenny Hermoso without her consent during the World Cup celebrations. And she started the hashtag Se Acabó, the Spanish football's version of Me Too.
Which means like, it's over, it's ended, no more kind of thing.
Exactly.
Because, for people that don't know the ins and outs of the story, the Spain's women team have had years of complaints against the federation and their coach and everything. But this is what kind of brought it onto the international stage. And Alexia and her Barcelona teammates were recognised by the Catalan Parliament. And Alexia took the opportunity to talk about the discrimination they face.
Som aquí per quedar-nos, som aquí per ajudar les que vindran, perquè encara falta molt de camí per fer.
We're here to stay, she says, Lea.
Yes, she does. And she continues, we're here for those who come after us because there's still a long road ahead. As you see with the serious situation that we're facing with the Federation and the changes that we're all asking for, so that no woman in or outside the world of football will ever again go through a situation of contempt, lack of respect, or abuse.
And I think one thing it's important to say for any listeners like not here is just the visual impact that Putellas has had as well, and other like her teammates like Aitana Bonmatí and people like that, is you now see kids wearing Barcelona shirts, but instead of Messi or whoever on the back, you see Alexia. And I think it's great.
It's also just great that young girls, they have these role models and they get to see women play football.
Time now for our Catalan phrase. What's it this week, Lea?
This week it's Visca la lluita feminista.
Visca la lluita feminista, which is long live the feminist struggle. Pretty apt for International Women's Day.
I think so. It's something that people will say during today's demonstration.
That's us for today. Thanks for joining me, Lea.
Thank you.
Thanks to you for listening, and we'll be back with another episode of Filling the Sink early next week as we talk about Oscar night. Until then, from me, Lorcan Doherty, and all of us here at Catalan News, bye for now, adeu.